Today, we're finally going to get that 1982 40 horsepower Mercury back together and see if it runs. I was so excited to get working that apparently I forgot to shoot an intro in the shop, so without further ado, let's get into it. This is the after-work garage. Before getting this back together, we need to service the thermostat and poppet valve. And no, you didn't miss anything. The motor didn't magically reassemble itself. This is just old footage from disassembly showing how to access the thermostat housing. To get to this poppet valve and thermostat assembly, we have to take off this support here, and it looks like there's just 4 bolts down here, and then 1 support here, and that's all I see. There is a ground strap on this bolt here. Oh, there's a ground strap on this one too. Apparently to get this off, you have to take off the bottom spark plug. Now we can take off this housing right here. These bolts look like they've been taken off a bunch. They're all rounded up and beat up, and that's not from me, so I'm assuming this has been off in the past for sure. The one towards the center is shorter. The one towards the front is much longer. I have to remember that. And off comes the poppet valve housing. Tell you what, we'll start by taking this screw out here, and then I'm going to take this bolt off next to see if this whole thing lifts off. So I think this screw just holds on this diaphragm. I don't think it's supposed to hold on everything. Yeah, that doesn't look awesome, and that doesn't move at all, so let's go ahead and take this bolt off. So it looks like there's 3 different size bolts here. Long one goes here, shortest one goes here, intermediate one goes here. Hey, there we go. Okay. There's our problem, or there's one of them certainly. You saw how stuck this was here. This is the poppet valve, and this allows water to flow when at higher RPMs. When there's higher water pressure, this should pop up and allow water to flow through this passage into this passage. And I do not think it was doing that given how stuck it was on there and how corroded everything was with the diaphragm here. Our thermostat here also is not looking good, so we're gonna have to order 2 new of these. I don't think I need a new poppet valve, this part right here. I'll get a new diaphragm for sure, and a new one of these rubber gaskets. Also definitely gonna need another one of whatever this used to be. It's a really ugly gasket. Look at that. I wonder if it was made like that. Looks like it molded. I mean, I don't actually think it molded, but it's gross. All right, thermostat is sitting here, and it is super stuck as well. Okay. Okay, I have our thermostat pieces lined up here. Obviously, we're gonna have to reuse some pieces like this poppet valve. This is a diaphragm that opens and sits up. This is a diaphragm for the poppet valve that sits right up here and screws into there. So what we're going to do is change this guy over, and this has a plastic insert in it. So we have our new diaphragm here, but we'll have to change over our plastic insert, put our screw in, we're good to go. This washer seals this plate up against the block that it goes onto. And then we have the poppet valve itself. This has an insert in it here. It's like super stuck in there, but it's actually 2 pieces. So we're going to put this into its groove. There we are. Come on. Let's get it all happy on this side. So that looks good. And then if we remember, this beveled edge is up or down or whatever way it goes. I don't actually remember. I think it's down because this goes in here. So in the motor, this screws into there. That sits like that. But this goes under the block, this goes on top of this. You'll see it in a second. We also have the spring for this valve here, and the purpose of it is when the motor gets really going and you crank it up, even if the motor's cold, what you do is you're pushing water through here at a high enough pressure that it forces this valve open against the spring pressure to allow increased circulation through the block. That way, not all of the water has to come through this little tiny hole. You get a much higher flow through this valve. So that does bring us to our thermostat. And I don't know where the old one went. I think it rolled around somewhere and I threw it out because it's been forever. I know, since I've been up here working on this motor, I've had a lot of other things to do. There's a little groove inside here that fits around this lip, and then this shape up here fits and seals it up over on the block side. You'll see that in just a second when we go over there. So to get this ready, I'm just going to stretch this rubber thing around here. This is something that can dry out, and if it cracks and doesn't seal well, what you'll have is an engine that runs cold starting up. It takes a long time to warm up. So thermostat, poppet valve, let's go put it on the motor. Alright, so this is the poppet valve housing and thermostat housing on the block itself. And then we have this unit that attaches to all this electrical stuff that has the diaphragm for the poppet valve as well as the housing for the thermostat on the back side. Just put the thermostat in here. This drops down here and seats up against that, and when it's cold it seats up against this as well, and when it's warm this plunger opens up and allows water to come through up here. Also need this gasket. Goes around here. So this thing sits up in here. The spring just goes around that little lip. So since this poppet valve seals up against this rubber piece, I'm going to set it in here, push this plastic piece in, get it seated down. It's kind of a hard, tight fit there. In fact, it didn't want to go in at all. It had a little like casting lip on it, so I just sanded it off with some 400 grit sandpaper. But now you can see this valve will push open under high water pressure and spring shut when it's not experiencing that water pressure. One thing that happened on my other boat, much more modern engine, is the equivalent valve here. This plastic piece got damaged as they were installing it. Whoever changed it out, or even maybe from the factory, damaged one of the fins, and so it just was stuck completely open. It had gotten pushed up in there, got stuck open, and the engine would never warm up. So I found that and fixed it. So yeah, this sits down here, and I think we're ready to put this piece on. So let's flip this guy over. Make sure we get him set in there. So now that we have our top placed down here, I'm gonna put this diaphragm in, and then that screws into the poppet valve up here. All right, so you gotta hold these fins at the bottom apparently to get this screwed in. So I was just holding these fins on the bottom with a vice grip carefully, just kind of put them in between there so it couldn't turn, while I screwed this into the top. I feel that thermostat seat in there too. There we go. All right, that's on. Okay, next up is this wad of cables and this wad of cables. This definitely goes on the bottom here, so I'm gonna set that down. Believe this is the trigger mechanism for spark. So as you advance the throttle, this thing swings over and you get spark advance. So that works like that. And this thing, which is twisted right now, but I believe comes like this. Have our bolts to go in here. If we remember, we have our black and yellow wire that goes to this block, but I'm gonna hook that up in just a second. I'm more concerned with getting this on right now. It's funny, there's different bolts for these two are different than these. Let's get this wiring sorted out before we put the flywheel on. I know this wire came around here, I believe. Okay, so we have our brown and white here. Brown and white attaches to the bottom side. And then the brown, this is just solid brown, I believe attaches to the brown and yellow slot. So I looked back at my old video just to see where this attaches because it's been so long. And this black and yellow wire from the wiring harness attaches to the black and yellow wire here. Do note that there's also a a yellow and black wire, but I think it seems like the first color is the main color. So black and yellow is mainly black with a yellow stripe. So we'll put this guy on here. Now, I noticed something really unfortunate. I move this bundle of wires kind of out of the way. This is the shift linkage. That is supposed, the pokey thing is supposed to go in this slide. As you can see, it's not. And to get this off, I have to lift the whole power head up. But I'm wondering if it's worth doing that or if I can separate this and this bolt and this bolt. So I got one bolt here, one bolt that's possibly gettable here, and then 2 screws it looks like. Let's give that a shot. Now we'll see if this bolt clears this. But honestly, I just need to get it loose enough to lift up in front so that I can lift this thing up. Impact driver for the win. Hey, there we go. Sweet. Well, that problem solved. Now we're shifting with our linkage like we should. All right, let's come around this side and we're going to install the shift linkage. So I believe this attaches here to this bolt, and this is going to come up. This is kind of like a wobbly, crazy thing. I think this comes up here. If we kind of get everything in place, I'm trusting that it's going to all kind of fall into place, but we'll see. Okay, something's happened here. This has come apart. So there's a spring in here that allows this to move separately, and it, like that, and it has kind of come apart. And I feel like this should have some sort of bearing surface on it. I don't know. Alright, there's clearly a big giant washer that goes back there. Maybe it's this one. Oh, I stuck it on the front. That's what I did. Did I? Yeah, that goes there. This goes here. This washer back here is what keeps these pieces from separating. So that's important. No? Definitely good to know. I took a second look, and this bolt here is definitely all that's holding this on. There's not like a bearing of some type there. So I'm definitely going to Loctite it so that we can leave it a little loose and then not worry about vibration necessarily causing it to fall out. Seems to be the way it wants to go. Okay. We've got this. There's a bolt that goes through here. And this is the thing that actually opens and closes the throttle plate. What comes through here? Seems to operate pretty smoothly. Let's get this linkage put in. It's a metric. There's one metric 8 on here. And it's this one. Must be a replacement. Someone put on there at some point. So that moves the spark advance linkage there. There we are. So the next thing we have to do is install the hoses in and out of the fuel pump. And the larger ones, these are 5/16 ID, are going to be for water. This one hooks up down here and is an in. This one hooks up to this small piece and it goes down into the telltale. I think that may have been where some of the water was leaking around the cowl when I initially started it up, because there's really nothing holding this together except a little zip tie that someone put on there. So not sure, we'll see. And then obviously we have to get a fuel line. The one on top here is going to go to the carburetor, and this one that joins in the bottom here is coming from our fuel filter. So let's go ahead and put that together. Okay, so this is the telltale. As you can see, there's a screw with a little keeper, and I think I see why water might have been squirting out of here, because as you can see, there's just the zip tie someone put on there, holding this tube into here. And with that small orifice, I can see there being a lot of pressure here, potentially, meaning this is, if this was loose, water could be coming out of here into the cowl. I'm not sure, just a thought, but I'll save you the play-by-play on cutting and installing the new hoses. It's not the most fun job, and there's not much space to work, but some long-nosed pliers and persistence will get you there in the end. So now we're going to put the fuel filter back on, and this sits on a bracket that also holds the wiring harness. I believe these 2 bolts are the ones that hold that on, so we will take these off. Okay, so that's back on there. So the first thing I'm going to do is reassemble the flywheel. If you remember, this is the flywheel hub, and I couldn't get it off of the crankshaft, and once I got this off, I put a puller on here, got it up. Anyways, it was super stuck, but we have the issue of the flywheel, which has magnets down here, and so if we get in the wrong orientation, we're not going to have the timing on the motor correct. This is going to be a spacer, so this is going to go on here. Then comes the flywheel, then comes this plate, then comes this pull string emergency pull start thing, and then, you know, bolt it all together. But I look back at the videos, and what you'll see is that the keyway on this hub faces this label, which also faces number 8. So it's going to be oriented like that. First challenge, though, is to get this all assembled without that magnet pulling everything to the center. So this set here, that set there. I can almost line it up by the rough spots. There we are. And then we have number 8 facing this way. So there we go. Some of these numbers are worn off. We're going to try to do the ones we can see. It's a 6. Alright, looks like we're back together. Reassembly of the starter motor, front bracket, and wiring blocks is just the reverse of taking it apart. But when in doubt, I looked back at videos from the disassembly, which was really helpful and highlights the benefit of some sort of visual documentation when working with something you're not super familiar with. In particular, I find that photos or video capture little details that you may not see at the time, but may be important later. Okay, so I got the motor hooked up here. I got the leg put on. I have fuel and a battery hooked up. I tried to jump it before, and the lesson was I was using a cheap, crappy jumper cables, and a little aluminum wire in there just wasn't able to conduct enough amperage. So I have these good copper wires hooked up now. I'm going to just jump across the starter solenoid with a wrench head, and hopefully this conducts enough. We'll see. There we are, look at that. Alright. So I think what we're seeing here is that the throttle has to be just a little bit open, otherwise it's not going to start, but I'm pretty happy with how easily it's starting, especially compared to last time. Let me take you over here. This will adjust the timing if I just move this independently. We can also relax the timing forward this way. We can advance it. We obviously have our exhaust. Water's running cool out of there. Cylinder jackets are cool. Come on. back together. And we can choke it out with a choke. We can kill it out. And there we go. We're done. So I think we have to mess with the timing just a little bit. And that's going to be how much the timing advances compared to the throttle by this set screw. And then obviously going to have to set the idles, which is right now a little high. It doesn't like to idle real low. I think that's partly because it's an old motor. But it's starting way easier. I mean, just a few seconds of cranking and it starts up, as opposed to working at it. So I'm gonna call it a win. It's not a rebuilt motor, but it's a repaired motor, and definitely serviceable and functional, and something that you could put on the water. So I got that started just in time, but thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time on the After Work Garage.